Hey girl, hey, I am so excited to have you here. I am Dr. Stephanie Lynn, and I welcome you into my home. I want to talk to you about navigating trauma and how I healed myself, how I took my healing into my hands. I took the responsibility and I now live healed. I live trauma-free. I live with boundaries in place. And guess what? I didn't piss anybody off in the process. So I'll start from the beginning. I guess that would be a great place to start, huh? Because you're like, well, who the hell are you and what qualifies you to be on my YouTube and be on my radio? And so I've probably been healing actively for 7 years. And if you know anything about cycles or the power of cycles, 7 is the number of completion. And then 8 begins a new beginning. And so the last 7 years, I sat down and I did a chronology of everything that I'd gone through. You've heard of the dark night of the soul, right? Well, I came to tell you that's not a woo-woo thing. I went through that shit and it was, cruel and unusual punishment comes to mind, but it was really surreal and it's something that I really needed to do. If we borrow from the Bible, it would have been akin to Moses going on the mountain. Remember when he went on the mountain and he came down with tablets? Well, he was up there for some time. And so it would be akin to that. You go and you go away and you sit with God or what you believe to be God, and you sit with your higher self. But more importantly, you sit with your bullshit. You sit with that. You look at it, you dissect it, you get some clarity around it, and then you come out clean, you come out healed, you come out taking responsibility and not blaming others. So I started in 2016, 2017, and I walked past the mirror one day and I didn't know who it was that was looking at me back in the mirror. And I said, now wait a minute now, you done let yourself go. This is beyond anything. I had gotten up to 360 pounds, y'all, and I'm 5'4". So carrying that much weight on a 5'4" frame, and I didn't even notice it. I just thought it was water weight. And I'm like, at what point does it stop being water weight and it's just you obese and you have an unhealthy relationship with food? So that was the first trigger. And I knew something was gravely wrong with me. I was using food to cover up depression. I was using food to cover up anger, not knowing how to process anger. I was using food to cover up pride. That's a big one that especially women, black women, we don't really talk about. We say that we do a lot of things because a lot of people expect us to do it, but a small portion of that is that it soothes some type of vanity in us to be needed that much, which also stems from trauma. So physically, I didn't like myself. I felt trapped in my body. So I started there. I lost 167 pounds over 2 years, despite what people think. I lost it 2 years. And after 2 years, then that's when I started doing the internal work. Because I said, okay, now I've lost the weight. I'm healthy. I have a healthy relationship with food. But what was it that I was using food to mask? That's when the dark night of the soul came in. That's when I met my pride. That's when I met my fear. That's when I met my self-loathing. That's when I met all of these things. That's why they call it the dark night of the soul. It's the dark side of ourselves that we have to actually live with, that nobody else sees. And in many cases, not even our spouses or our children know that part of us. But I want to tell you today, I want to encourage you to love that part of you even more, because that's the part of you where the trauma is. That's the part of you where the questions are. That's the part of you where the confusion is. And so to keep putting that away, whether you're eating, whether you're drinking, whether you're doing pornography, whether you're going out, whether you have a sex addiction, whatever it is that you are using to bifurcate, meaning bypass the unpleasant part of who you are, I invite you today on this podcast, in this session, to at least have a conversation with yourself about what it is you are so vehemently running from. Because the brain is designed to protect you. That's its function. And so it has created this thing called an ego to protect you from the things that have hurt you. And so what is leading you now is likely your ego and not your true self, not your spiritual self, not that self that's made in the image and the likeness of God that we read about in the Bible and we quote so eloquently, but we don't believe. Back to my story. Physically hated myself. Then I started doing the shadow work. And that's when I really discovered I didn't know how to properly dispose of anger, because I do think it should be disposed of. I didn't know how to process the depression I was feeling. I didn't even know how to articulate it, guys. I was functioning clinically depressed. Somebody type that, write that. Functioning clinically depressed. Now, see, there's a difference between being regular depressed and clinical depressed. Clinical depressed means they put you on them what? Antidepressants. I was on the medicine. I was on Zola. I had so many medications. I don't even know how I survived. And the worst part is I was going through this when I was worshiping on stages in front of 5,000 people, 10,000 people, some of the largest churches in the Houston area. I'm telling them I know what prayer can do, and I wasn't praying. I know God will work it out. You know the song, Jesus will work it out, singing it every Sunday, but not believing that he could work it out for me. I was doing all of these, carrying all of these masks, and I was miserable. And then I took it out on my children. And then I took it out on my relationships, which is why, taking all this time, we'll talk about how I found the love of my life in another episode. But for a very long time, I had failed relationship after failed relationship after failed relationship. And it wasn't always them. Many times, it was me and my expectation of love, because I hadn't processed what love actually is. I only cared about what I thought it was. So here I am, worshiping, praising, telling everybody about the goodness of God, and Shana Nananaya, and she'd be coming around the mountain and shouting and doing all these things, and I would come home and now I would just be like, this is total bullshit. This is total bullshit. I'm not even being true to myself. And so we sing this song, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. The walls of my internal life came crashing down. Helen Baylor has her testimony, and in her testimony she talks about how she had this long relationship with drugs, and she says, but I had a praying grandmother. And y'all know the story. She said, boom, I hit the wall and all of my bodily functions were decaying. That is what was happening to me internally. I wasn't experiencing it physically because I had healed, but internally it was breaking down. I was coming to terms with, I'm really angry. And before I could even get to why am I angry, do you know how much I paid a therapist to help me say those words? I'm really angry. If I told you the amount, you would throw your phone down, because I still can't believe I paid it. But I didn't have the healing strategies that I'm going to be teaching you in this podcast series. I didn't have the healing tools that I teach my clients inside of my coaching containers. I didn't have the strategies and the techniques and the therapy modalities to actually move me from pain to purpose. Oh, but I have them now. And I am showing up on your timeline, in your Spotify feed, on your radio right now, because there is a saying that when the student is ready, the what? Teacher will appear. And I'm here to teach you everything that I've learned. And so here I am, having all of these internal battles, not liking what I'm really uncovering. And it's very unsettling to not like what you see in the mirror. But it's also very healing, because until you can get to love what you see as a reflection in the mirror, you'll always be your own worst enemy. Somebody write that, type that. I no longer wish to be my own worst enemy. I no longer wish to be my own worst enemy. The first step is admitting that there are dark parts of you. There are dark parts of you. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, this is a teaching podcast. Yeah, everything I'm telling you has a purpose, and my stories have an ending. All right, it's not doing fluff. I want to tell you my story so that you can understand that I can help you because I am you. Not I was you, I am you. And I am constantly healing every single day. That's another myth that I'll break down in a future episode. But the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that there is a dark part of me that I don't like. The second thing, after you've acknowledged that it does exist, now we can start naming it, because that which we name, we can what? Heal. See, the key to healing is revealing. There's a scripture in the Bible that is so simple, but it is so profound. It says that they may know the truth, and what? The truth shall what? Set them free. In some translations, it says the truth will make them free. Either way, the truth pulls you out of bondage, whether it's physical, spiritual, metaphysical, whatever bondage you're in. The truth lifts you out of bondage and it places you in freedom. The truth does that. And the only way to get to the truth is to look it in its eye and say, I see you. Not vilify it, but say, I see you and I value you and I thank you for what you've done. But now it's time for me to reconcile who I want to be with who you've helped me be. And those are two very different people. So now that we've acknowledged it, and now we start to peel back the layers and we name it. Is it shame? Is it guilt? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it depression? Whatever it is, you gotta name it. Once you name it, then the third thing is really easy. You're already doing it. Get help. But don't get help from the woo-woos. Don't get help from people who have such a narrow version of what it looks like. Get help from someone that resonates with you. And by resonate with you, I mean someone who used to be you. Someone who has walked a mile in your shoes. Honey, I have walked 5,000 miles in this shoe of trauma because I've had it since I was born. Let me explain. Have you had it since you was born? I was born into an extended and a blended family. See, my parents had children before they got together. And then when they got together, their previous kids plus me made my first blended family experience. That didn't work out because my biological dad is an asshole. And he was very mean. And so that didn't work out. So my mom and my dad split. Then my mom gets married again. Now, I said these two people came together and had been married before. So how many marriages is that my mother is in? My dad was her second marriage because she had a first marriage where my sister was born. So now we're up to 2. What is it? 0 and 2? We 0 and 2. Oh, we 2 and 0, whatever it is. We 0 and 2. We down. And so my mother finds her last partner, which happens to be my stepfather, which happens to be the father that actually raises me. Well, then he comes with kids. He had 3 kids when he got married, but about 10 years into the marriage, we found out he had 2 in Virginia. See, old people was doing shit too. See, trauma is generational. So they brought their shit to the table, and now it's 3 blended families, and I'm the baby of all of them. So I was born into trauma, literally. And then my father wanted to be a pastor, so he was called to pastorship. So I saw it in my family. Nobody don't like nobody. They blamed my mama for they getting married. You know the story. And then all of them had substance abuse problems, which they still have to this day. So when I say it was just trauma and drama, please believe me. And I'm giving you the Cliff Notes. So then my dad gets called into the pastorship. And here we go with the second layer of trauma. Where are my PKs at? Raise your hand. Pastors' kids. Deacons' kids. All of these people in the church. Come on, raise your hand. Now, most people would think that would be an honor. Bullshit. Let me tell you what it is. It's a glass bowl is what it is. You have to live your life in such a granularly inspective way that it is counterproductive to growth. It is counterproductive to a balanced life. Because you go to school with people that you go to church with. Then when you get off work, when your mama go to work, all her friends who come over to play cards go to church. You go to BTU with the same people that you go to school with. When you go to Vacation Bible School, it's the same people. When y'all go to Kids Across America, it's the same people. So you see the same people all the time. What is that? That's a very limited way. And all the time, people are sleeping with each other. The deacon want to knock this one out. People fighting over money. Can you see how I was literally born into trauma? And then I got grown. And because I hadn't healed the trauma that I was born into, because I didn't know how, I'd absorbed that from my community and from my culture. Here I am in my 20s and 30s trying to navigate life with all of this trauma that I didn't even know I had. And so got pregnant at 19. It's a typical story. I got out of my mama's house and got wild. Buck D wild. Somebody write that. Buck wild. If they ever come up with the freaknik and people start zooming in, they gonna see me. And and ain't gonna be nothing I can say. If they ever release the unedited version, I'm there. I'm there. And Galveston, if anybody come with the Galveston tapes from the early 90s, I might end up in jail for the stuff that we was doing. So I was out there. But it was because I was in such a stringent life. So fast forward. Failed relationship. 2 baby daddies. 2 different baby daddies. Both of my children have different fathers. When I say I was loose, I was loose. And then after that, I said, okay, nah, this is a bit much. So I pulled back from the partying and I got serious. My mother put her neck on the line, got me a job. And from about 22 to about 35, I gave my life to my children. Bought a Tahoe, gave up all my luxury cars, and gave my life to my children. Worked really hard, got 2 degrees. So you can do it. But in all of that, did you ever hear me say I went to therapy and I worked on my healing? No. And that's one of the major lessons that I wanted to, if you take nothing away from this, other than I've been where you are, take away that in the years when you think you're doing well, that's the time to get therapy. That's the time to unpack what it is that's festering beneath the surface. Not when you get into your golden years. I'm in my 40s and I'm just now getting these epiphanies. It's because during those years where I was focused on my children, I was not focused on healing what had shaped me up until that point. And so here I am, lived a whole life, and that's how I grew up in the church and leading. I started leading my first choir when I was 12. And so saw it, you just go to these big churches and you just be looking at people like, that's what y'all come to church to do? Y'all want to see who's sleeping with each other and give comments on what people wearing? Don't nobody want Jesus? Don't nobody want God? Trauma. I was inundated in it. My personal life, my church life, my family life. I couldn't escape it. Until after I lost that weight, I began to listen to the questions that I had had about organized religion. I'd always had questions about organized religion. And I began to seek out answers to that. I never forget, I was sitting in a worship service. And I hate the altar call. Let me just go on the record and say that. I hate the altar call because the altar call, people come up, they pray for the same stuff every week. And they still sleeping with the same people and they still doing the same thing. So there was this altar call, last story. There was this altar call. And I'm sitting there and the same people are up at the front. And I remember crying. I was literally crying, y'all. I had just finished worshiping. I couldn't sit through the altar prayer. I got up. Now this is in the middle of church. I rose up like he rose from the dead. I rose up, got my bag, put it on my arm, slew my Bible over my shoulder, put that church finger up and walked out down the middle aisle. And that was the last day that I subscribed to organized religion. And that was the day that I met God. And that was the day that I found these therapies that have actually helped me to heal. That was when I found hypnotherapy. There's nothing wrong with that. That was when I found mirroring and self-processing. These are all the things that I teach. These are all the things that I super support because that is what has helped heal me. So I hope in our short time together, I've given you enough stories. I've given you enough background, and I've hopefully given you enough to think about, that you would at least start the conversation. Because if I can heal myself from my own trauma, you can too. Choose today to be healed. Until next time, take care.